Director for Sustainable Finance and ESG, here with my colleague Nathra.
Hi, I'm Nathra. I'm excited to be replacing it on day 2. Nathra Jandran, Corporate Sustainability Manager here at GreenBiz Group, and my job is to help curate content for GreenBiz Net Zero, which some of you might have tuned into. It's one of our virtual conferences, as well as GreenBiz, our conference that happens every year in Arizona, which is a good time, a hoot and a holler, if you will.
Nice.
I also teach a course every summer at Brown University on indigenous perspectives and sustainability leadership with students. So we touch a lot on biodiversity and the importance of nature and ancestral knowledge. So I'm really in this inaugural Bloom conference that we have going on here.
I'm learning in real time that you teach this course. I don't think I knew that.
Yes. Surprise.
How a big theme that has been thoughtfully and thoroughly embedded into Bloom is indigenous perspective on the topic, which is not always the case, to be honest, at corporate conferences. It's oftentimes not the case at all. What is your takeaway from meeting some of those folks who are attending this week in Bloom?
Absolutely. I got to sit down with Deanna Izoni and Ray Izoni from the Say Nation for a wonderful session that we held yesterday called Setting Things Right with Rights-Based Conservation. And there's sometimes I feel like we need a whole conference just for that. We also got to have a huge presence with Juan Carlos Hintia. He's on the short list for the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in the Amazon and uplifting indigenous voices. So that was quite wonderful, and to hear directly from communities that are on the ground. I thought that was wonderful. What about you, Grant?
Awesome.
What's one of your takeaways so far?
I got to spend a whopping 3.5 minutes with Juan Carlos here yesterday as he was seated there. I didn't get to catch him any time after that, so my loss.
Yes.
My takeaways so far, as the person focused on sustainable finance and investing here at GreenBiz, is that this is that critical moment of growth at the beginning of something wonderful, where there's a lot of momentum, ambition, other forward-looking kind of activated verbs, but also the lack of clarity of what to do with that in some ways. Lots of money that wants to go towards solution pertains to this crisis, and pathways being developed as to how to do that, but pretty fundamental questions around basics of definitions and shared language and shared understanding of tying 1 + 1 to everything else that follows as far as where the revenue would come from, just like the fundamentals of how to activate this. So some of which we'll get into with Helen Crowley and Heba Larson, a keynote conversation coming up in a little bit that I'll be hosting on the rise of nature markets and getting it right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot at stake.
I was just about to say, you're about to break it down for us on the keynote stage and talk about that. And I know you and I have a loop that comes with finance, and I'm really curious to see how you're going to marry that with biodiversity and nature markets. So I'm looking forward to that conversation, as well as our conversation about how rivers and forests have legal rights in New Zealand.
Yes. That is the first program coming up, Supreme Court Justice, and I will say no more because you're about to hear it. It's pretty fascinating, and it ties somewhat neatly into the conversation we're having about nature markets and getting them right. Some kind of fundamental questions that don't have easy answers that I will pose to Helen and Heba and let them answer rather than taking a stab myself.
Turn to the experts, I guess.
Yes, exactly. With the little time we have left, let's wow people with some nature facts. I'm going to steal Katie's from yesterday because Nathra doesn't know the answer yet.
Okay, yeah, Grant's been gatekeeping this answer from me, but I will say, okay, I have 2 categories of nature facts. One is math related. So something that really fascinated me growing up was the Fibonacci sequence. And the Fibonacci sequence is present in nature, particularly in the structure of pine cones. So math is nature and nature is math. Secondly,
Mind blown.
as someone who has a special place in my heart for animals, cows have best friends, and that is really important. I don't know why, it just is.
That's endearing. Mine is less endearing, but cute still, which is that owls in their shell as fetuses do what? They hoot.
They hoot.
In the shell, yeah.
But do they holler?
Oh, no, that's to be determined.
Wow.
We'll catch up on that.
That is actually fascinating. I didn't know that they were developed enough to produce sound.
Neither did I. There's a lot I don't know. That's what I'm learning at this conference, actually. There's a whole plethora of things I don't know.
Yeah, well, if there's one takeaway from this, it's that nature is amazing and has so many solutions and wows us every day.
That's right. All right, well, we'll bring you the Bloom Day 2 keynotes coming up here after the next ad break.
Yes,
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Grant.
Please welcome to the stage Senior Director, Nature and Food Systems, Teresa Lee.
Everybody have to you a whiner. Long time me a wait for the signer. Every gal a liner. Can you back it up? Me know say you can whine up.
Welcome back, everyone, to day 2 of the Bloom keynote program. How was your experience so far? Yeah? Y'all had a good time? I've had a really good time. I enjoyed connecting with so many friends, colleagues, collaborators, and meeting lots of new people this morning and yesterday as well. So thank you all for being here. So it's been quite an intense time these past 28 hours that we've been together since yesterday's keynote program. So before we jump into the conversations today, I just wanted to take a moment for us all to reset together. So I invite you to find a comfortable seat. Wiggle around a little bit on your chair. Relax. You've made it through almost the entire event at this point. Let's take a big breath in together and a breath out. Another big breath in and another breath out. Let's thank the majestic redwood forests in California for the first breath and the Pacific Ocean for the oxygen in the second breath that we took. And now, if you're comfortable, I invite you to briefly close your eyes. Notice how your feet are on the ground, your back against the chair. Notice if your mind is calm or busy. And think back of the opening yesterday when I asked you, why did you come here? What are you here to do? Did you accomplish that? Or is there something that you have left to do? Maybe it's a question that you still need to get answered in the keynote room. Maybe it's a person you want to find at the reception afterwards. Maybe it's a thank you you want to offer for something they've said or something they've done. Once you find your thing that you still have left to do here, take another big breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And realize that you're here with a community of people who are trying to do very similar things. We're trying to do really hard things, getting the global economy to value the health of ecosystems and the value of biodiversity. And that's not an easy thing to do, but you're not in it alone. You have 550 people here at Bloom with you on the same journey. So feel the energy of those people around you and rely on them as we're all going to be progressing on that journey over the coming years together. Let's do one more big breath together. In through the nose, out through the mouth. And then come back to the room, wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers, open your eyes softly with a soft gaze. And now that we've calmed down our senses from the overload that these conferences can be, I think we have the spaciousness to tune in to our first conversation today where we'll hear from one of the most impressive biodiversity leaders that we have on this planet, which is Justice Joe Williams. He is the first judge to have been elected to, first Maori judge to have been elected to the Supreme Court in New Zealand, and he's doing incredibly important work on the rights of nature. And I'm very pleased that he's joining us with some thoughts on why that work matters and how we all can be supporting it. So please join me in welcoming Justice Joe Williams, who's tuning in from New Zealand.
Tēnā koutou e ngā iwi o roto I te motu o honu. Tatu atu kia koutou o lone ngā iwi take o tēnā whenua tēnei te mihi atu o Aotearoa kia koutou, te kā Māui kia koutou. Ka tangihia o tātou mate, rātou kia rātou, tātou kia tātou, o rātou waha kōrero, rātou kanohi ora. Firstly, greetings from the land that we call his fish, to Turtle Island, and particularly to what we call the whenua, the indigenous people of that place, the One. I bring my greetings to you all. And in greeting you, I remember our many ancestors that have fallen on your side and on my side. We take a moment to grieve for them and ask that even if we cannot be together in one place, at least they can be my ancestors to yours. Because if they are joined, since we are nothing but their speaking mouths and their living faces, then we too are joined. I'm sorry that I can't be there with you in San Jose. Unfortunately, I've got a day job which I can't get leave from, otherwise I would have been there with you, but it's a pleasure to be able to address you at such a significant event as the Bloom 23 event. Apparently I've got 10 minutes to convince you of my messages, so this is kind of biodiversity speed dating, and I haven't had a lot of luck with that, so with me. Actually, I should tell you, I'm a judge. I'm a judge on the New Zealand Supreme Court, so I think like a lawyer. And when I think about issues of those sick ideas are that you are autonomous, and unless you commit a crime, and you can control your relationships as you wish, and you have control of the environment, of the planet, or as you're calling it at this conference, nature. Well, that imagination, the world is ruled by humans who are maximally free to the extent consistent, because you imagine nature as something different to you. Nature is other, and you are abstracted from it, above it, and you control it. This idea somehow that humans, gods, aren't part of the game, they just control it. That sounds a bit dark, I know, but actually when you look at the basic principles of the law, that seems to be a pretty accurate description. When you think about it, that description is a little problematic. So let me talk to you about another form of imagining. I'm a Polynesian from the bottom of the Polynesian Triangle, an island called Te Ika Maui, or the Fish of Maui, one of 3 islands of my home country, Aotearoa, which you'll know as New Zealand. The northern end of Polynesia is actually part of your country, Hawaii. The eastern end of Polynesia is Rapa Nui, or Easter Island, as you'll probably know it as. And in the middle, of the base of the arrowhead, is Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji. The imagining within that triangle, and this is consistent with the imaginings of indigenous people all over the planet, I think, an idea I'm going to come back to, is not like that at all. Here is how my culture imagines humans and the planet. Ranginui is the Sky Father. His spouse is Papa Tuanuku, the Earth Mother. There is Tane, the forest, but he has a lot of Tane Mahuta, the great tree. Tane te waiora, Tane the life-giving water. Ananga. I'm telling you this brief story because in my culture, everything is related. So according to this genealogy, let me give you another line. Tane married Hinetitama. And in that union from that union came the first humans. After the trees, after the water. So my imagining is that the humans and the trees are closely related. Ironically, the scientists now agree. About 20% or 25% of the DNA of trees is the same as our DNA. So even for you Westerners, that the trees and us share an ancestor. This imagining where there's an ancestor and the earth is an ancestor is that all is alive. There's no such thing as the organic and the inorganic. Everything is organic. Everything has, in my culture, it's called modi. And the best way to describe it is that sound your fridge makes, that low hum that tells you this thing is alive. Papatuanuku, the earth, has modi. She's alive. Her descendants, the rocks, the genealogy down to Rakahore, there are literally millions of names, all hum, and all is related. So, it doesn't make sense to speak of nature, like speaking of your leg as being different, or speaking of your grandmother as if she were a stranger. Now, in my experience, indigenous people all imagine the world in this kind of way. Of course, there are differences, sometimes quite strong differences, but the basic idea that we aren't separate from reality, we aren't gods, we are cogs in a living ecosystem, living not just those things that the Westerners call organic, but an entirely alive planet, is common across indigenous people. The reason I've walked you through this is that in my country over the last 15 years or so, there's been something of a reawakening of this, a remembering of this idea. Firstly, in respect of the Waikato River, which is kind of our version of the Mississippi, but the biggest and busiest used river country. The administration of the river was, in 2010, vested in a joint kind of entity between the state, which we call the Crown, and the local tribes. And then in 2014, one of our most pristine forests, the Urewera forest, was granted legal personality and run thereafter by a joint board of, we call the mana whenua, the people of the land, and the state, the Crown. And then 3 years later in 2017, the second biggest river, the Whanganui, often called Te Awa Tupua, the mystical or the magical river, was also granted legal personality and a whole new form of administration built around it, which included all stakeholders brilliantly, because the local tribe said, we can't run this thing alone. We need the farmers, we need the tourism operators, we need the local authority, we need central government to develop the strategy. If we do it by ourselves, we will just generate conflict. But the key, the core idea was this river is alive, from the mountains to the sea. Well, so what? So the Maoris, or indigenous people, want to colonize the minds and the imaginings of the colonizers and start to remind them that they are not the gods, they are not the masters, and nature is not nature. Conservation is a swear word. That we live in the earth. We are part of the earth. We are the cousins, the trees, the birds, not in some romantic green way, but actually in our law. So we managed to convince the settlers that, maybe they could start thinking like that too. What's so significant about that? Is that just a local New Zealand thing, or does it have broader significance? Well, I think is this: 40% of the surviving intact ecosystems on the planet are occupied by indigenous peoples who share these imaginings. That's why those ecosystems are intact. If that were not the case, they would be shaved bare, just like the ecosystems that you live in. The Amazon, the Northern Boreal, the Southwest Pacific, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, the Solomons, Sub-Saharan West Africa. These are the places where the great forests are. All of them occupied and administered are like the imagined just described to you. These imaginings, and therefore they're saving you. In New Zealand, this modest outcome of the counter-colonization, not just in the law of my country, but in the imaginings of its brown or white, shows this can work. And in your businesses and join for indigenous peoples wherever you are and counter-colonize self. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Please welcome to the stage, Director, Sustain.
nature and climate are so interlinked. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer now, but several years ago, the idea of nature-based solutions for climate was really sort of, we were out on the sort of over there on the side table. We weren't at the main table, you know, the nature-based solutions for climate. But now the recognition you've got to solve for both or solve for neither is there. So I think those all have come together in literally the last 3 years, along with now the frameworks to say, this is what you've got to do. TNFD is perhaps the one that we know the most about in terms of saying, this is what risk is going to look like for you. This is where opportunity starts for you as a corporate, as a private sector entity. So that's why I think we're in a very different space.
Yeah. And maybe this is the same piece of research, but it was the survey you did of about international institutional investors on their readiness for engaging in the nature investment space, a more rich category of investor than one might find at our co-located event here. Nature will evolve into its own distinct asset class.
Yeah.
So question for you, and also curious if you have thoughts, why does that matter?
Yeah, I'm going to say a couple of things, but Hib is the expert on investment. I'm an ecologist, sort of winging my way through this world. So I thought that was fascinating. So the institutional investors, the group that we surveyed, were already quite interested in nature, and the majority of them said they wanted to up their investments in nature. So that was already really interesting. But as you said, Grant, over half of them said that nature should be its own asset class, so which is really exciting, because once you create an asset class, it becomes explicit, and the rules of the game about, you know, finance flowing into that and what the rules that come with that in terms of risk and returns start being clearer, instead of it sort of being embedded and a little implicit in other types of asset classes. So I think this idea that is going to be a standalone asset class, and we can unpack that a bit later, is I think.
No, I would agree with that, because I think what we've seen sort of in the climate space is a very aligned vision of how to allocate capital. So we saw the whole electrification wave, and I think that is what we're lacking in when it comes to nature. I think the risk, though, is that we become too focused on a smaller segment, so land-based solutions and nature-based solutions, whereas in my rather see that we include nature in every aspect of the value chain. We know, for instance, that corporates need to disclose their sort of value chains and can see to be more aware as well what's going on. So nature is there every step of the way, but I think the easiest way to define it for investors at this point is in nature itself as a primary asset, but I think we quickly need to build those building blocks to incorporate it across the whole portfolio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a somewhat similar vein, your firm hosts an initiative, the Task Force on Nature Markets. You put out a series of recommendations to a pretty broad swath of folks, corporates, policymakers, civil society alike, on making nature markets work. And one statement that stood out to me was that if left simply to evolve in their own way, they, being nature markets, could make things worse. So what does evolving in their own way look like exactly, and what are the potential consequences that we would hope to avoid in that process?
Yeah, I think which many in the audience might be able to relate to is the whole development of the voluntary carbon market, which at the onset had all the right intentions and provided a very important revenue stream to some of these local communities. But since we've seen the evolution of a quite opaque market, and I think the danger is that capital doesn't get directed to where it's needed. And more importantly, I think the equitable element has got completely forgotten. And I think that is the risk that we want to avoid. And just recognizing that nature is a finite asset, don't have time to waste on this inertia of doing things the way we've always done them. We need to do them differently, and we need to bring the local communities and indigenous people into the conversation this time around.
Can I just add?
Yeah, go for it.
So I think that the challenge has been the way a lot of nature markets have worked today has been an extractive approach, right? I mean, that's where, whether it's through agriculture and forestry or fisheries, or you extract the value from nature, you don't actually replenish it. Our challenge now is to develop new rules of the game and new ways of taking supply chains, for example, instead of extracting the value from nature, is to replenish, restore, avoid the loss, restore, regenerate, conserve, replenish natural capital. The only way you replenish natural capital is investing in living nature and reinvesting, and the stewards of that are local communities and indigenous people. So how do we take these markets and reconstruct the rules of the game so that financing flows in a different way?
Yeah. I want to channel a different moderator for this question. That is, a decade plus ago, Grant, UC humanities major, a lot more opinions, a lot less informed, and a lot more hair. Just learning about capitalism in a thoughtful way, and as a Berkeley humanities student, is a little suspect of it. For those who are either tuning in or some in the audience who share the sentiment of like the concern about a lot of the negative impacts that we're talking about here are coming from a history of undervaluing and overexploiting nature, but that the idea of putting a price on living things and privatizing things to this extent maybe is going to add to the problem and have a hard time finding confidence in that being a solution. What's your response to that crowd?
Heba.
Yeah, okay. I think I might challenge that question because it's already happening. And I think that's part of the problem. So we're not putting a value, and I don't necessarily mean a financial value, but nature isn't counted for at all. And so we're already facing these challenges. So I think I can see the criticism of certain new sort of emerging markets like biodiversity credits, et cetera. And to your point, we really need to change the financial architecture to ensure it's being done the right way, but it's already privatized, if you like. Sort of sheer opaqueness of markets is one of the problems, and commodities are a really big part of the issues.
Yeah, I'd say, shall I?
Yeah, please.
On that way?
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's a really important point. I remember years ago when I worked at Caring, the Global Lecture Group, and we did a corporate natural capital account, there was a lot of angst around natural capital accounting in those days, saying, well, you're putting a price on nature. Whereas in fact it wasn't that at all. It's valuing something and putting a price on it are two different things. And I think what we've got to do is value it, understand the value, the intrinsic, the extrinsic, the market value, as well as all the other values that come with nature. And then where appropriate, how does some sort of pricing of some element of that sequestration, or whether it's water retention, or whether it's erosion control or resilience, that you can value in a market context so that we can get you can price it and price it so you can get the investment in. So I think valuing it, understand the value, and then using the current architecture, even though no, we've got to change it, to flow the financing in is okay, because with that will come confidence to act differently and change the rules and understand, oh, there's a value proposition here that's greater than just putting a price on a certain element of nature.
Yeah. I think undergraduate Grant would have a hard time making counterpoints to either of those. Going back to, Helen, the comment you were saying that you've been doing this for a while, and 10 years ago, even more than 2 or 3 years ago, you were your camp was at the smaller table, not at the big table here in these conversations. And a theme that's a through line through Bloom and through Verge as well, that is now table stakes, which is like, and you were quoting Johan Rockström, the father or grandfather or whatever he is to planetary boundaries, that either you use biodiversity or you don't solve either. And that's kind of a fundamentally understood thing now in this space. And going back to your recommendations, in those recommendations, you were kind of making clear that the playbook to solving climate and the playbook to solving nature have some overlap, but they have really distinct differences that are paramount to focus on. Differences and the first couple chapters of that playbook that we should highlight here.
Yeah. I think that one of the key differences is when we talk about climate, we have a very clearly defined, or at least we think we do, a defined set of metrics that we measure and that we want to achieve. When it comes to nature, we don't have those metrics. So in terms of setting a baseline and really setting objectives, I think we need to become much more clearer in the international stage what we mean by the state of nature, so we need to be able to measure it in the same way. Point of the indigenous people and local community are the main stewards of the majority of the world's biodiversity, so they really need to have a seat at the table. And then thirdly, I think it's this focused investment opportunity that we've seen in climate. We lack that today, so we need to find ways and tools and different financial structures to allow capital to flow into nature in the right way.
Yeah.
I would say the first chapter of that book would be run towards complexity. It's okay. You know, like that's what nature is biodiversity, you know, it's these genes, ecosystem services are complex. The complexity gives them the power of resilience, power of adaptation, power of evolution. It is a phenomenal power that we only just sort of beginning to understand. So while you might not need to understand all that complexity, you need to just embrace that. I mean, I don't know how my iPhone works, but I can use it. Like, there's a lot of complexity behind that. So we need interfaces, to what he was saying, to sort of simplify that complexity, not simplify the complexity, but communicate the complexity in a simple way. And I think we're getting there between all the fantastic nature tech, and I know Lucy's going to talk later about what's happening in nature tech, what's happening in measuring biodiversity, 50 years, 100 years of ecological studies coming together with tech to really be able to sort of show changes over time in biodiversity in different elements of nature. So I think that we've got to sort of start embracing that and saying we will be able to track this. We can show land use change over time. We can track how many species there are in a soil, and we can see what happens over time. We can do that, so we can start, you know, we know what we need to do.
Yeah.
We can start tracking and measuring that and learning as we're going.
A lot of what we're talking about here and a lot of why conferences like Bloom are so important are that they produce newness and forward-looking change. New relationships lead to new ideas, lead to new partnerships, and we change business as usual. And I'll preface this by saying wins are great, win-wins are better, win-win-wins are ideal, win to infinity is the best, but there's also, in a kind of context that we're working in around a mass extinction and the level of severity of this crisis, there's also things we have to stop doing that are not just building more of something. So in the vein of things we kind of need to stop, first thing that comes to mind, in my mind and maybe yours too, is around subsidies, but are there other things that come top of mind for both of you in terms of the things we need to stop doing to get it right when it comes to nature markets?
I mean, I could say on the global biodiversity framework, so that came out of the Kunming-Montreal Protocol, the Kunming-Montreal, Convention on Biological Diversity, the global biodiversity framework, is very clear that we've got to halt the drivers of loss, and in that it talks about subsidies and the $500 billion a year that need to be repurposed so that your local communities and people that are stewards of nature are still rewarded and incentivized, but to do things differently. So stopping the bad is a really important part of moving forward towards a more nature-positive world. And that is a big reconfiguration. So it's all very exciting to go to the new opportunity of, oh, I'm going to invest in this restoration, and I'm going to invest in this conservation, I'm going to invest in this new fabulous thing that I can measure nature. That's fantastic. That's great opportunity and a lot of investment, and a lot of people are very excited about that, and that's terrific. That doesn't mean that you don't turn around and go, well, hang on a minute, what am I currently doing that is creating risk and is creating negative outcomes? And so that's where we've got to start looking, particularly at agriculture, particularly at the way we extract currently from nature, and think, well, how do we do that differently and stop doing the bad?
Yeah.
And I would just add to that in a very simplified form. I think it's dangerous that we keep separating nature from the economy. I think the two are integral, and we need to consider nature within the context of every single decision and not see it as this sort of separate thing here that we need to measure, and we need to understand how it flows through the economy.
I'm looking at the clock telling us that we have a little over 2 minutes, and in that time, I would love to hear what you would say hypothetically, or not hypothetically, when you're back with us at Bloom 24. What would you want to point back to say, this is how we, as this community here, and those tuning in from the live stream, what they did to change business as usual? What would be the key successes you would hope to highlight?
Oh, well, I think the first thing would be to acknowledge business as usual is probably not possible. It's not possible, but let's acknowledge that we might have a bit more time doing business as usual. But if you acknowledge that business as usual in terms of, I'm not saying you in the room, your business maybe is really heading towards nature positive, and that's tremendous, but generally business as usual is not going to be possible. So acknowledging that, acknowledging and understanding the interface of your business with nature. And then the third thing is starting to commit, even if it's even if it's just a beginning of actions toward stopping the drivers, stopping the bad, and doing some good towards nature is already, if just even acknowledging that and building a plan around that, you can do that in a year. You can't go nature positive in a year, but you can do that.
Yeah.
And I think what excites me the most is actually the innovation and technologies. I think a lot of you here have heard some incredible initiatives, and I think the whole biodiversity space is so fascinating. So I think we followed a number of companies, and I hope that in a year's time, a lot of those will sort of set the new standards in markets.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I look forward in the time in between reading the first couple chapters of that nature playbook, watching it play out. Thank you, Helen and Heba, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Please join me in thanking Helen and Heba.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I'll follow you guys.
Thank you. That was a great conversation. Let's give it up for Grant, Heba, and Helen. All right. So before we go to our next section, I want to do a quick shout out to our sponsors. We're really grateful that they're supporting us this week at Bloom. Special shout out to Deloitte, our foundational sponsor, and a big thank you to all of our other sponsors and partners as well. All right, so now that we know how to fund the transition to a nature-positive economy, we're going to talk about the technologies that we need to transform how we run the world. And one person who has been at the helm of that movement is Lucy Almond. She's been leading an organization called Nature, or a collective called Nature for Climate, for a really long time. And I'm pleased that now at Bloom, they're launching their latest edition of the Nature Tech report, and Lucy has joined us from London to give you all an overview of what nature tech is and how that market is looking like right now. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Lucy Almond.
So hi everyone. I'm Lucy. I believe it is customary right now to say that I'm delighted to be here, but I am experiencing mind-altering amounts of jet lag, so I actually don't know if I'm coming or going. But luckily for you, I do know why I'm here, a very long way from home. I'm here to talk about the Nature Tech market report that we released earlier today. It's a joint effort between Nature for Climate, of which I'm chair, and a Paris-based VC firm called Serena, and the MRV Collective, many of whom are in the room with us here today, I believe. So can we have a shout out for the MRV Collective, if you're in here? Excellent. It's always good to perform to a home crowd, so I'm very pleased with that. So, what am I going to talk about in the next 8 minutes? So I'm basically going to talk a little bit about what nature tech is, the numbers, i.e. the investment trends that we've seen. I'll touch on the risks and safeguards needed, and a little bit on the outlook of the market. Before I get into that, just a little bit of background on Nature for Climate. So we've been campaigning for nature as a climate solution for the last 7 years, trying to land the message that nature is a third of the solution needed by 2030. And we've grown from 5 original founding organizations to the 22 you see behind me today. And our tracking data tells us that awareness levels for nature-based solutions has risen from less than 1% when we started to more than 20% today. And also, and importantly, that funding levels are beginning to rise for nature-based solutions, but nowhere near to the amount needed, as we've been hearing from our other speakers. So what is nature tech? I'm going to do a very quick, very unscientific poll here about nature tech. So if you can cast your mind back 2 years, put your hand up if you have ever heard of nature tech. Yeah, not many of you. I'm pleased to see not many of you. Good. Okay, and after the last couple of days, if you could put your hand up if you think you work in a nature tech related sector or your company needs to use nature tech in the future. Excellent. This is visible evidence of a growing market. If I'd have realized this, we could have just done this experiment and saved a lot of time and money on doing the report, but we are where we are. So what is nature tech? Well, until recently, it was considered a subsector of climate tech. But it extends beyond that, and nowadays can be considered its own investment category. At Nature for Climate, we originally defined nature tech in quite a narrow way on technology that can accelerate and scale up nature-based solutions. But we've expanded that definition to include a broad range of environmental challenges such as deforestation, soil degradation, water pollution, species loss. And these 7 categories that you see behind me are the areas that are now attracting investment interest and demand for services. So during Bloom, you will have heard of examples of high-impact nature tech applications from the pioneers that are developing them. So one of the most in demand is the combination of geospatial analysis, digital tools, and AI being used for project origination and MRV. So this is being used by companies such as Space Intelligence, Pachama, Cultivo, Chloris Geospatial. It's a very long list because these are game-changer technologies that can transform how we measure carbon and biodiversity impact. Elsewhere, companies like Landlife and Flying Forests are developing planting innovation technologies such as smart coated seeds or automated planting vehicles that can help accelerate and increase survival rates of important restoration projects around the world. Another example is coming out of the Crowther Lab in Switzerland, where they are aiming to develop the first biodiversity index. So it will collapse 400 data sets into one single measurement that should be used to measure the state of nature's complexity, and it's called SEED. So what do the numbers in the report tell us? Well, as you all know, or at least the people next door at Verge know, there's been huge growth in climate tech. So it's gone from $413 million 10 years ago to $40 billion today. By comparison, the nature tech market is still relatively small. The numbers tell us that the accumulated VC investment in nature tech is around $7.5 billion today, with 2/3 of that funding coming from the US market. This slide shows you the growth from $1 billion in 2018 to $1.6 billion today, with a peak of $2.4 billion. And it's worth noting that the overall VC market declined considerably during this time, minus 50%, according to Crunchbase, whereas the nature tech market declined by only 35%. So which of the 7 areas are attracting the most investment? Not surprisingly, food and ag is the biggest, with more than $5 billion. MRV, the second, with $1.23 billion. And MRV is experiencing really strong momentum. So of all the early stage funding numbers, that is the only one achieving year-on-year increases over the last 5 years. But you also see that there are areas that remain seriously underinvested, like water conservation and management and biodiversity restoration. So what about risks? It's essential as we grow the nature tech market that we weigh up the risks and put in place safeguards. So one example here, particularly with regard to indigenous peoples, who are the guardians of the ecosystems where this tech is being applied and deployed. So for example, the use of drones can often take away jobs from indigenous people, but it doesn't have to be that way. And our report provides examples of where the power of indigenous knowledge is being combined with these emerging technologies. Another example is from Carbon Tanzania, where tech's being used to keep project developers accountable. So here they've transformed an app called Sensing Clues that was actually developed to monitor wildlife crime, but can also track a community-first led approach to projects. So what is the future outlook for nature tech? Well, I think as we've heard today, there will be new global actors in this decarbonized and nature-positive economy, and those actors will rely on climate and nature technologies. So nature tech is a new frontier that will scale rapidly and hopefully reach the same levels of maturity and scale as climate tech. And so lastly, how can you get involved? Well, download the report from the Nature for Climate website and a QR code that does work somewhere, even though it's not here. But if you go to the website, you can download the report and join our nature tech movement. We learned with our nature-based solutions movement that every movement needs a home, and I hope that Bloom has become that home for the nature tech ecosystem. So finally, I'd just like to say thank you. Firstly, thank you to Bloom for, in the words of ABBA, taking a chance on me. Very grateful. Secondly, I'd like to thank the 50+ contributors to the Nature Tech report and all the Nature Tech innovators that I've met this week who aren't in the report. But thirdly, I'd like to pay a very special personal thank you to somebody I met at Bloom for the first time yesterday, who transformed my own worldview and how I think about my work. So when I was consulting this person on the very important topic of what outfit and shoes to wear on stage today, they replied to me rather bluntly. They described their family and they told me about their 2 girls, a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old. And they said, and I'm paraphrasing for decency reasons, in 30 years' time, do you think my kids, when they're dealing with the state of the planet, are going to give a damn about what shoes you wore on stage at Bloom? So I thank her very much for the renewed level of clarity in my work. So thank you for listening.
Please welcome to the stage Senior Manager of Startup Programs, Jake Mitchell.
Had to claim my seat over there. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Accelerate at Bloom 23. I'm Jake Mitchell, Senior Manager of Startup Programs with GreenBiz. Nature tech entrepreneurs are scaling businesses to protect and regenerate nature while pushing industry stalwarts to change their own business practices to a nature-positive future. Accelerate is one of the primary ways in which we spotlight entrepreneurs here at GreenBiz who bring determination, ingenuity, grit to scaling high-quality nature-based solutions for a better future. Are you ready? I hope you're ready because I'm ready and these guys are ready, so let's do this. Here's how the Accelerate session is going to work today. You'll hear from 5 incredible nature tech entrepreneurs who each have 2.5 minutes to pitch, after which we'll invite you to cast your votes to determine the winner. I'm excited to announce that the winner of Accelerate at Bloom today will pitch on the Verge Accelerate stage tomorrow with the Verge winners for the chance to win $20,000 in funding from GreenBiz. Thank you. With that, I'm delighted to invite our two esteemed industry experts to the stage. Please join me in welcoming Rachel Lim, Impact Investment Associate at Silver Strand Capital, and Tom Quigley, Co-founder and Managing Director at Superorganism. Welcome, welcome.
Am I in this one, right? Yeah.
Thank you so much to both of you for joining. Rachel and Tom will contextualize the startup pitches and add some further context on how they fit into the broader nature tech economy. Now, remember, in the end, it will be up to all of you to determine the winner of Accelerate at Bloom 23. So let's do this. Let's get started with our first pitch. We'll begin with Allison, CEO of Vibrant Planet. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage. The clicker's right there. Yeah.
Okay, hi everybody. I am Allison Wolf, CEO of Vibrant Planet. We are a public benefit corp that is made up of some very sophisticated machine learning engineers and platform builders that built things like Netflix and Meta and Guidewire, and amazing scientists that are building a global platform to restore very high-risk landscapes in fire-adapted ecosystems, which is about half of land on Earth. The global economy is 100% based on the health of these ecosystems. So our food system is dependent on these ecosystems. Our pharmaceutical system, our recreation economies throughout the Western US and world are dependent on these ecosystems staying intact. Unfortunately, these ecosystem services and a lot of communities are literally blowing up on us right now, and we are in a race against time to restore ecosystem and community resilience across the Western US and globe. Our system is operating at the intersection of this Venn diagram, where we are managing risk by restoring the ecosystem services, removing trees to save forests, and in the process of doing so, in managing risk, we're unlocking ecosystem services and enhancing them. We're starting in the Western US, where 240 million acres and about 1,800 communities are at very high risk of severe wildfire. We got into this mess by removing tribes. They were burning this land for 20,000 years with low-intensity fire. And by removing them and then getting really good at suppressing fire with more and more people living in the wild-urban interface, we have created a mess. And then we added climate change to the mix, and that is why things are becoming so severe and how we have entered into the era of mega fire. Our system is monitoring current conditions at a very fine scale and up to very large global scales to understand what is the current risk, where do we have opportunities to enhance ecosystem services benefit. So we work with the Forest Service, BLM, national parks, utilities, fire districts, counties to constantly and adaptively prioritize resources that they have to basically get the most bang for the buck in terms of ecological services enhancement and then avoided losses to towns and ecosystem services. We're a SaaS model, will be deployed in about 18 million acres by the end of this year. And we are going to be raising a Series B next summer. So if you would like to learn about what we're doing with biodiversity, introducing systems like beaver.
Hi, I'm Lee. I'm the CEO of EcoBot. We're a climate tech platform that predicts the future by collecting real-time field data. We're all here at this conference because we believe that biodiversity is the key to resilience, and it's the leading indicator of climate impact as measured in humankind's relationship to ecosystems. It's a really exciting time to be looking at this space because of the technology that is being developed. But we do have a gap, and the gap is that we can't send the 100,000 scientists into the field to ground truth this data in a way that we need to do this work. And every data prediction model needs validation data. Well, there are hundreds of thousands of scientists in the field collecting biodiversity and water and soil data for the purpose of getting a permit. But a permit is where data goes to die. All of the water and soil and vegetation data that is gathered is either siloed with an organization or just simply lost. And that's where EcoBot comes in. We have developed a workforce enablement platform that is accelerating environmental permitting. And as a byproduct of speeding this environmental permitting work, we're building the benchmark field data that we need in order to train climate data. If we're to build biodiversity impact prediction, this is essential. And we've got a great head start. We're already at 5 million biodiversity and water data points. That's behind the 120,000 permits that our customers have collected in the field. And right now we're only in the US and we're only focused on a few areas of environmental consulting. But imagine this data at scale across all environmental sectors across the entire planet. And this will only work if people in the field want to use this platform. It's like a secret weapon, has to be my favorite customer quote. Here's some of our key business metrics, some of the partners we already have in place. We believe that we can help global companies meet their nature positive goals. With environmental permitting as the market driver, we're building the expert network data that we need to build better technology enhanced by AI.
All right, do we have our deck up? Great, let's go. Hi everyone, I'm Roland from Inversa Leathers. At Inversa, we're healing the planet with fashion. Now, we all know this. Fashion as an industry is unsustainable. For decades, fashion brands have been under attack by governments and consumers for their roles in greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity loss, deforestation, and so all these brands have made a lot of promises. And they've set ESG targets to hit by 2025, 2030, but time is running short now. The industry is not in an awareness gap, but a solutions gap. That's why at Inversa, we're filling that solutions gap. This is the first material that restores biodiversity in a highly effective and, for our clients, a highly marketable way. And now, the $100 billion leather market finally has a material they can use to hit their ESG commitments. We do this by taking invasive species like this lionfish. We make it into luxury grade leather, and we sell that leather to fashion brands who use it to make their products. And thus, by removing invasive predators, we're restoring ecosystems around the world, like these coral reefs. And now, our client brands get to tell their consumers, for the first time ever, the world's actually better off. You saved 70,000 native reef fish because this pair of shoes exists. That's actually crazy, y'all. Before Inversa, nobody could say that. And as our sales numbers show, brands and consumers love that story. So, our raise. We're raising $3 million on a $15 million valuation. This raise will go towards scaling up, further raising our already very nice margins, and providing runway for the team. To talk about exits, the most likely exit for us is going to be via acquisition to one of the big fashion houses like LVMH, Kering, Hermes. These houses regularly do acquire their leather suppliers, especially if they want to keep that material exclusive. Finally, about our team. We are chomping at the bit, and we let nothing stand in our way. First, we have a strategy specialist, Arav, from Princeton and McKinsey as CEO. We have Kahan, who's designed product launch and marketing strategies for top pharma brands and who's also a materials scientist. And we have me, an ops specialist from Harvard, who's built systems across 3 continents for a Fortune 500 company. And our advisors are tenured fashion specialists who have already achieved market exits of their own.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Tickle. Here I am at my natural habitat. Grow Oyster Reefs is my second concrete business. Grow Oyster Reefs has patented technology to revive and regenerate our ocean's lost reefs. Oyster reefs are amazing. They are unfortunately in decline by 85% worldwide. They sequester carbon. They are home to 350 extra species. They purify the water and all sorts of other amazing things. So here's a look at one of our products, the Reef Tangle, going into the barren Gulf of Mexico floor. And here the results are only after 1 year. Very exciting, very pleased with that. And how do we do all of this? Our work is based in biomimicry, so I look to nature to help us solve problems. The first problem is what to make the material out of. We look to the oyster shell for that. Our high calcium carbonate material comes in at 85% calcium carbonate in comparison to the oyster shell that comes in at 95%. The reef tile is our modular reef builder, and that is set up so that the oysters grow in their natural configuration to regenerate reefs and to hopefully go on to the seabed and so that they are ever-growing reefs. So these are our results, 100 oysters per square foot. Very pleased with that. The only comparable reef metrics is for Harris Creek in the Chesapeake Bay, and that is, and ours happened in 1 year, theirs happened in 5 years. We're working on multi-species regeneration, including seagrasses and mangroves, and working on, with the Smith Marine Technology Partners, we're a grantee, we're establishing metrics for that. And we're working with Dominion Energy and Duke Energy to scale our product up to regenerate reefs. How do we get people to pay for them? So the way we're doing it is we're making a really very cool new mold to put our reef tiles together into 160 units and to be able to make a flexible mat to cover the cable arrays. We have a fantastic team, and we've had great traction, early win with the Nature Conservancy, MIT Solve, and the Biomimicry Institute, waiting for a big NSF grant, pins and needles there, and then thank you very much. I would ask you to vote for us, please, and we also welcome investment. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Aaron Hall, founder, CEO of Entropic Materials. This modern world is pretty amazing. It's enabled all of us to be here with an innumerable number of comforts. But the reality of it is that the manufacturing and technical achievements that we've made are wreaking havoc on our planet. We use a tremendous amount of energy, heavy metal catalysts, and other toxic substances to produce the feedstocks and the materials that we use. Let's just take plastics, for instance. Over 7.6 billion tons of them have been produced since the 50s, and 86% of that is waste that pollutes our land, our oceans, our air, our bodies. This damage that we're doing to nature, we're doing to ourselves. We need to do something different. And thankfully, nature has laid out a path for us. See, the beautiful biodiversity in nature is enabled by enzymes that do a dizzying array of diverse chemistries to enable the scents and smells and neurotransmitters and all the things that make life happen and sweet. And these enzymes are fragile. They're evolved to be in cells, so we can't just directly use them in manufacturing. But that's where we come in. Our bio-inspired nanoprotectant platform lets us stabilize them so that we can use them to do better, cleaner chemistry. And we're using that and demonstrating it to make self-degrading plastics and to solve the plastic waste problem from the inside out. By embedding the enzymes inside the materials, we can trigger them to degrade completely without producing microplastics. And we have a number of wonderful value props around scalability and drop-in, low usage levels, and fast degradation in both warm water baths and compost environments, which are easy and accessible. And we're bringing this to market by designing products that are inherently better so that brands no longer have to have their faces on waste. And we can expand the design space of certifiably compostable products and ease the regulatory standards and, most importantly, have a better, cleaner planet. And that's just the start. We're going to clean up chemical manufacturing and a number of other industries as well. We're ready to bloom. I have an incredible team supporting me, Adam, Jolene, Marco, Rodolfo, we have new folks coming in, as well as government and private partners. I'd love to have you join us as well, so if you want to pilot our technology or you'd like to invest, please reach out, and thank you so much for your time and being here and the work you do.
Thank you to all the startups. What an incredible and inspiring group of entrepreneurs, truly. In just a minute, I'm going to turn to Tom and Rachel to contextualize what we've heard on stage today, provide some more insight. But first, it's time for all of you to pull out your phones and vote for which startup you think has the greatest impact to scale nature-based solutions. So open up the Whova app and navigate under the agenda. Go to this session. It's Accelerate at Bloom. When you're in there's a little button that says polls. Just click in there and submit your vote. Make sure to do so in the next 5 to 6 minutes before voting closes. So thank you. Okay, Rachel and Tom, thanks again so much for being here. Really great to share the stage with you too. This question's for both of you. You know, you've both been watching nature tech startups over the last few years. So what would you say, like, what's been developing and unique about this moment in time? And okay, Tom, let's start with you.
Well, a part of the moment, I think, is I was listening to Dr. Helen Crowley speak just before around the frameworks and the work that's been happening over the last 30 years really to move towards this space. A lot of that work still has, is yet to happen in the actual commitments that are going to be made by governments and corporates. And really what I think is committing to the moment right now, a lot of what we're seeing is just the extreme credibility of the founders that we see, that you've just seen on stage, that are bringing their entire careers worth of knowledge and skill sets, and also the talent that they have access to right now by dint of how great the companies are, the value propositions seem, to be able to just really access some of the best talent in the tech skills and also the conservation and ecology mindsets that are needed to do this work. That is a really marked difference that we see from 3, 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Just more hands on deck.
Absolutely.
More talent. Rachel, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think, in addition to the amazing founders and talent that we've seen, we're also seeing a lot of developments, I guess, in terms of market drivers from regulatory perspectives with, the Global Biodiversity Framework, High Seas Treaty. I think that's all kind of trickling down to make this market also more credible. And then you also have the market initiatives like the TNFD, SBTN, all these things we're talking about is definitely, I think a big driver and is making the investment opportunity more and more interesting.
Perfect, yeah, and this is actually a perfect segue, Rachel. I'm curious, without, I guess, giving away your secret sauce, I'm curious, what are you looking for particularly when looking to make an investment in a startup? Are there certain criteria, and how does that change maybe based on sector?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's an interesting one. To be honest, it's not too different. Even though we're impact investors, we're looking at a lot of the same things that other VC investors would look for. I think it's really important to have a good foundation of people. Do you have the right team with the right skill sets to execute the business? And people can also apply to advisors, the network that they bring. Do they have the right market intelligence and strategy to grow their business? Do they have clarity on how they're going to make their impact, but also make money to grow their impact and to have a really financially sustainable business as well. It's not too different from, I think, what you would expect normally with product and everything. So it's just about finding the balance.
Definitely. Are you using any of the new frameworks available to kind of inform your decisions on getting a little bit more granular on the impacts you're looking for?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think a lot of the impact frameworks that are emerging are actually also developed for financial institutions or for specific sectors. And for us, we've been doing a lot of thinking about how we quantify not necessarily just the impact of our supply chains, but also what we're catalyzing further. Because we're trying to have not just not so bad impact, we're actually trying to have really positive impact. So I think this is an ongoing discussion that we're having, and we're kind of trying to modify some of the frameworks to suit us, but kind of thinking of it from in a holistic viewpoint. It's not just about like site-specific metrics, because there's also ways you can look at the drivers of biodiversity loss and how we're having impacts there. So, not just looking at, oh, did, it become from 5 to 10 species at the site, but also looking at like, are we like addressing pollution or like invasive species invasions, et cetera. So
absolutely.
Work in progress.
Yeah. Definitely. Tom, I want to ask you a different question. Obviously, nature tech is a relatively nascent market, which is exciting and really leaves the door open for a wave of new technologies. So like, which technologies do you want to see that haven't necessarily entered the market yet?
I think the greatest part about my day-to-day job is that I get to be surprised constantly. And being able to see not just new technologies where we're wanting to see things like better ways to sense and collect the data that we need, as EcoBot pointed out, to train the new AI models. And really it's just a complex problem that we're working through together. So on the sensing side, things like better and cheaper and more available LiDAR or hyperspectral or other types of increasing spatial and temporal reliability for some of these sensing types, both from space and on the ground. Applications of AI on that data as it continues to get trained. But really, there are a lot of problems in many different industries that can be solved with the types of technologies that we already have. And when we see a lot of founders that come through with a deep background in that industry and the knowledge of those specific problems and how to solve them with existing technology, there are many, many exciting opportunities like that with the tech that we have today. And so that's the wave that we're very excited about.
Definitely. Thank you. We're running out of time here, so I do want to put you both on the spot. I know you weren't able to open up the app and make the vote yourself, but if you were able to, who would you vote for today and why? In 30 seconds or less. Rich, let's start with you.
It's a hard question because I think you guys have done a good job of assembling a pretty wide variety of startups doing very different things. I am a big fan of Inversa. I think they're addressing, I think a lot of times people ask what's the difference between investing in climate and biodiversity. I think the work that Inversa does is a very prime example of that, because invasive species, not necessarily a climate issue, but definitely an important one that needs to get addressed. So I'll say Inversa, but they were all excellent.
Great. What about you, Tom?
Well, I have to recuse myself because we are investors in Inversa. But so Inversa aside, I was very impressed with Vibrant Planet, and I think that while there definitely is that, being able to solve a specific slice of biodiversity focus like Inversa is doing, being able to solve for both climate and biodiversity challenges like solving the wildfire problem works towards is an extremely high leverage thing to be able to do. And then, Vibrant Planet bringing together those many multiple stakeholders that are involved in that complex mosaic of land that needs to work together to be able to solve such an enormous problem like the mega fires that we've been seeing. Their work has impressed me.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for your feedback and your votes. I'm excited to say we have our results. Can we get a little drum roll, please, from the audience? The winner of Accelerate at Bloom is Entropic Materials. Congratulations, Entropic. Congratulations to all the startups today. Back to you, Teresa. Thanks, guys. Thanks. That's awesome. Thank you.
What a great session. Congratulations to Entropic. I'm excited to see them back tomorrow here on stage for the Verge final. And now talking about finals, we're at our final session for Bloom. I'm so sad it's already over. And for this final session, I'm pleased that we have a special treat for you all lined up, where GreenBiz co-founder and chairman Joel McCower will join me here on stage to kind of help you all make sense of your experience at Bloom and what you're going to do next with what you learned and the connections that you've made. So welcome, Joel. Take it away.
Thanks, Teresa. Hey, everyone. So back when I was in high school, let's say 20-some years ago, my father one day asked me if I had done my homework. And I assured him I had. I hadn't. But he asked me, well, what did you learn? And I looked at my shoes or something, or mumbled basically, don't worry about it, I got it. And he said, you don't understand something until you can explain it to someone else. And I wrote that off at the time as just stuff Dad says, right? Until about, I don't know, 10 or some years later, and I realized, A, he's right. B, that's what I do for a living. And C, that's the best way to really internalize something is if you externalize it. So we're going to do a little thing today that we have never done before, not just at Bloom, obviously this is the first, but I don't think we've ever done it at a GreenBiz audience, which is at a plenary level to interact with you, to sort of figure out what did you learn, what happened for you in these last couple of days. And so there's going to be a few things that we did, but the first thing is that we're going to, if you know what a word cloud is, well, no, actually, yeah, we're going to have a word cloud where you're going to open the app and go to this session and poll. So start to do that if you don't mind. As much as I don't want people looking at the phone when I'm on stage, this is your invitation to do exactly that. If you go to the session and click on it, and then it says polls, what's a word that, or it could be two, that best summarizes your experience at Bloom? I'm not going to, just any word, whether it's about your feeling, whether it's about the content, whether it's about something, anything at all. Just, if you can type that in, and it will start to populate on the screen, and when there starts to be a little bit of population on that, I think Christine will put that slide up. Not yet, Christine, that's next. I think there's a word cloud that's going to come up, but we just want to get, sort of understand some of what you heard. I've got it on my phone because I get to see that, but I'm seeing inspired, energizing, hope, expansive, connection. These are the big words that showed up. Learning, energizing keeps showing up, so that's great. So keep that going, and if we can figure out how to put that, oh, there it is, right on the screen. I'm not seeing it here, so it's right up there. You can see it better than I. So this is great. They tend to be mostly positive words. I'm trying to see if I can see anything here that's less than positive. So I'm hoping that you're, if you have some other words that aren't necessarily positive, that's fair. So that's part one. So thank you for doing that. Part two is want you to turn to somebody in the audience, someone that whether you know or don't know, and just offer, what was an aha moment for you in this? What's a takeaway that you have that you're going to be bringing back to the office, as they say? Just take 2-3 minutes to share with somebody what you heard, or what was a big aha and a big takeaway for you. Can you do that? We'll take 2-3 minutes. Go for it. This is time to strike the stage now. Yeah.
Go ahead and start the stage right now.
And while you're doing that, they're going to be striking the stage, but not because we're closing up early, because we're getting ready for the final piece. Give it another minute.
Hey.
All right. Here we are, back with you at the Bloom Sidebar. The audience is currently going through their aha moment as to what they've taken away in this last 2 days at Bloom.
Yeah, it's the first of its kind where we've done something interactive during the keynote, and it's perfectly in Joel fashion to engage the audience in such a way. So we hear some applause in the background. Woo! What's your aha moment, Grant?
I think I'm still ahaing. I think it's a process. I don't think I've come to my moment. I think what I got exposed to in a new way in my world of focusing on institutional investors and their interests as it pertains to sustainability and more recently biodiversity. A couple big firms like Schroders is a good example, saying that biodiversity is their primary focus going forward, not just in the sustainability umbrella, but as an investment theme, period.
Yeah.
Getting to see some of those folks in person and dig behind the headlines as to how they're actually beginning that work. And it's still nascent, just like Jake was talking about with the startup space, the early stage capital world, it's also still nascent. But getting to understand that how these frameworks and pathways that we talk a lot about here, all the various acronyms, TNFD and SPTN and others who joined us on the sidebar yesterday.
Alphabet soup.
The alphabet souping is enabling that, and it's starting. So my ahaing is matching the momentum that they're making.
Right. And I think working in the field is like curators of content and people that have to, you know, keep our finger on the pulse. It's hard to have aha moments because we read about this day in and day out, but I think one aha moment that sort of stood out to me from the conference was learning that 80% of the world's biodiversity is stewarded by indigenous communities. Like I had a sense of that, but I think when you think about 80% of land and biodiversity in the hands of these communities is pretty stellar. But on the contrary to that, like out of the $2.7 billion that was invested in rainforest preservation in the last decade, only 1% of that was given to indigenous communities. So you have someone or communities that are doing all this work to preserve their land and their culture and biodiversity that affects all of us, grasshopper effect.
Yes.
And then you have the funding that is basically, you have billions of dollars of funding and they're getting none of it. So a huge disparity there, and talking to a lot of the indigenous communities that were present at Bloom and Verge, that was just reiterated so much, that disparity. And it makes me think, okay, as a curator of content, how can we uplift these voices more often and think about these things further?
I think that adding on to that statistic, I think there was Juan Carlos who shared this yesterday on the sidebar that it's 80% of the natural ecosystems are stewarded by 4% of the world's population, I think. So quite a big responsibility.
Quite.
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to think of what else is ahaing at the moment. I think part of the aha actually is just the people I've met here. This is a brand new community. This is Bloom's first year. As with any first convening launch, you don't quite know who's going to show up. You know who you want to show up, but you just kind of find out on the day of. And I have my own personal affinity for Greenfin, obviously. It's my near and dearest event. But this community of 500 and change people, every single one I've encountered is deeply passionate, deeply opinionated in an informed and kind of refreshing way, and have a lot of energy behind the agenda that they're laying out. And I can't say that's the case for every conference I attend, to be honest.
That's
a
a
very
really good
intentional group.
I would say so. I mean, when you're fighting for like animals, life on Earth, the plants, everything, it's like you should be passionate, and I really respect that. I feel that is mirrored too with the Emerging Leaders group. For those of you watching who don't know, the Emerging Leaders program is a BIPOC scholarship program to help fund young professionals and students of color to come attend Bloom and Verge. And yeah, I've been talking to them. We ran into them at dinner yesterday. So passionate, so accomplished at such a young age, which is really cool and very commendable.
I was lying. So I still am ahaing, but I actually have another aha moment. I'm going to pile on. The talk before I got to speak with Helen and Hiba from the Supreme Court Justice from New Zealand.
Yes.
I got a sneak peek to watch that before we came here, but I'd consequently forgotten about it and got reminded watching it in real time today. And I think that feels like a sea change in some way for the Supreme Court body of a developed country to give official rights in that kind of setting to natural ecosystems.
Yes.
I can't speak for the U.S. Supreme Court doing something similar, but it feels monumental.
Yeah, I think so too. And if you think about these entities in the way that a lot of the indigenous communities have expressed, is that they have spirit within them, which makes them worthy of rights, which I think is actually another aha moment to reframe the way that we view biodiversity and nature.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been really rewarding being here, and I think that with this huge emphasis on the subject matter, I'm thinking and brainstorming about ways that we can incorporate this into every session that we do across our conferences, and have some element of biodiversity and nature, which I feel like we do a good job of incorporating, but bringing that to the next level.
Yeah. I also, still on a positive note, but this is there's a lot of comparisons made of we've done the climate thing for 20 plus years as an industry that's tried to aggregate the information, do something with that information to take different actions as to how we produce and consume things and how monetary value is ascribed. And there's been plenty of hiccups along the way. Just most of the data we've been shown on the various slides of Verge and Bloom keynotes, the carbon emission chart is still going up and to the right, and a lot of charts that we don't want to see going up and to the right still are. That's not to say we haven't made a ton of progress, but there's so much more in some ways at stake to what we're dealing with in the biodiversity crisis. Terms like mass extinction, I think, capture that. And there just isn't room to have hiccups and fumbles along the way.
Yeah.
So the conversation that I had with Helen and Hiba about nature markets and getting them right, I feel the impending sense of yes, have to get them right. And what Helen was saying of if we came back next year and she was able to point to how did we tweak business as usual to do something less usual, her answer being that business as usual simply isn't an option, period. And I like to see that that's more of a commonly accepted viewpoint in communities like this.
Absolutely. We cannot continue with business as usual.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's been emphasized over and over again in the keynotes and at the end of every session when we ask the speakers, what is your call to action? They say start.
Yeah.
Start now and start fast.
Yeah.
And don't get caught in the weeds of sustainability strategies, and if it's gonna implement the way that we want it to, just start and iterate on it as you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other takeaway, I love our job. We get to curate content.
We do.
We get to talk to smart people who know a lot about things that we want to know more about but don't, hence why we get to talk to them.
Yeah.
And write what we learn and host what we learn at events. And I sometimes don't realize just how hard these people's jobs are.
Right.
So this particular community is one that I have not gotten to know as well in my years of doing this. So this first chance encounter to meet a number, maybe a couple dozen so far, in some depth, and just hear about their day-to-day and the challenges they face internally and systemically and personally. It's quite hard work. So I don't think it's an overstatement to call them heroes in some regard.
I agree. And understanding that their jobs look so different than what I thought they would look like.
Yeah.
When I was speaking to one of the members of Seikei Dene Nation, I know I keep bringing them up, but they were just so impactful on me. They were talking about how so much of their day-to-day life includes land management. And for me, I was under the assumption that land management meant, going around in a cart and surveying different rivers and surveying mountains and taking water samples and things like that. And while it does include some of that, a big part of what land management looks like to them right now, given how the corporate landscape is playing into their community, is constantly managing and battling people trying to encroach in their land and use the resource in their land for corporate greed. So dealing with the lumber industry, logging, there was a dam that was set up against their will and they were told after the fact, things like that. So those are the aspects of land management that they are now focusing on, when before they were able to prioritize just keeping the well-being of their land, but now they're working on actively fighting out threats. So understanding that the members of this conference have really complex, very intense, very grueling work that they do, and it looks different than what we assume. But like you said, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah. Well, while we're still here, I'm going to reminisce on a previous job I had that I think is relevant to this.
Sure.
Some number of years ago, I worked for the United States Department of Agriculture, supporting the tree nurseries that I don't know how many there are now throughout the United States, but primary nurseries to grow trees for reforestation in national forests. I had a relatively unglamorous job. I drove a refrigerated truck full of trees 2 places.
Wow.
Pretty cool. A lot of good podcasting time and also staring out the window. But I got to attend some of the forest scientist meetings where they were discussing how to genetically modify trees to grow and match certain elevations that they'll have to grow at as the climate changes. And by the time they design and create that next crop, the climate changed faster than they predicted, so you'd have a whole swath or batch of trees that basically are going to die if we plant them. And they didn't have this whole nature tech ecosystem that we've hosted on stage today. This was 10 plus years ago, was just, I don't even know if that was a thing quite yet, or if it was that community that I was exposed to. I wouldn't say working with, because I was just driving the refrigerator truck, but that I got to listen to. I hope that they're finding opportunities and avenues to connect with the folks like those who joined on stage during Accelerate, and it sounds like they are based on some of what we heard. So I imagine those conversations are better informed and connected to those who are producing solutions like those.
Like those prediction models.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a field of constantly predicting the unpredictable and modeling and scaling for something that could change within a second, like a wildfire could completely wipe out a swath of forest. And we talk about this with carbon offsets and nature-based solutions too, where it's there is that risk. You could invest in a plot of land and that could be flooded, and that could completely ruin the project that you're thinking of doing. So there is risk involved. But would you say that risk is not worth taking action?
I would say it's worth it.
Me too.
Yeah, that's my summary. Great. Well, we will be back in a little bit to bring you some interviews with folks, some of whom I saw this morning in a couple of our tutorial sessions. Definitely had left wanting from those sessions, had some questions I didn't get to ask, so here we are, get to ask them now. So we'll be back.
We will.
Relatively soon.
See you soon.
It's to understand their supply chain and how they can engage all stakeholders that are involved in the project, and especially local communities and ILPLCs.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we talked about all biodiversity. Well, I said all biodiversity is local, but at the same time, talking to other locals, what have you learned? How have you done this? There's a lot of power in those kinds of connections and information sharing and just experience sharing. We got Alex, we got more over here?
Hey everyone, Andres, good to see you all again. One of the emerging leaders here for Bloom. One of the things I'm taking away from this conference is how important it is to bring nature to the conversations with our companies. When we are setting our strategies, when we're thinking about how we want to go about running our organizations, just mentioning nature, I think is something that is very absent right now that we need to educate people on. And then translate that into how that impacts our communities, right? We mentioned here having that local focus. It's really important, and thinking about both internal, external stakeholders and how that just impacts our overall communities. So Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, more about connections and local. And one point I want to pick up on, I think it was based on something that Olga said, is that we're talking about biodiversity, we're talking about science, obviously, but we're talking about nature and the things that we love and do. So it's head and heart. And the key, the challenge is, how do we integrate head and heart? Storytelling is one of the best ways you know how to do that, but it's not always just a story. But finding that sweet spot that inspires people, but actually has accountability or transparency or authenticity, facts, if you will, and finding ways to integrate head and heart as we connect with various partners, as we talk to our various stakeholders, constituencies. That's going to be a really important part of this as this goes forward. So thank you all for this, and let me bring back to the stage Teresa and Alex.
Thank you, Joel, for leading us through that session. What was your reflection, Alex? And can we have a huge round of applause for Alex? He's been doing an amazing job putting the program together.
Thank you. I'm just really struck by the community that we're forming here. I knew people in this space were amazing, but I'm just really sense of like we're in the right place at the right time with the right group of people. I'm struck by your generosity and your collaborative nature, but more so, all of your answers just now, I feel like we're really grounded, and I'm surprised by that, honestly. Sometimes I feel like we get really caught up in the frameworks, the metrics, the targets, the markets, but I'm so happy to hear that you're really keeping your eye on the outcome we're looking for. We are trying to create a better planet where we can thrive, we can rest, we can live healthily. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that reflection. All right, that's it from the keynote stage, almost. We have a really amazing closing performance for you all lined up. That's just going to bring a moment of serenity and lightness to you all, and beauty. Beauty is a really important value and thing that will connect us back to nature as well. After that, we're not done yet. Please join us over there in the Bloom balcony for a closing reception, and then we have the Rise Up after party tonight, so don't miss out on that. And please join us again next year at Bloom 24. We'll be back here in San Jose, October 29th and 30th. So with that, it's my pleasure to welcome the artists from the Artists Climate Collective here on stage, together with Suvi, who's a world-famous cellist.
Welcome back to Sidebar with Grant and Nathra. We just finished the keynote program at Bloom, and man, that was really good.
That was really good. And that last dance performance, reminded me just how stiff and out of shape I am, but more importantly, firm reminder that the Climate and Biodiversity Challenge, everybody has a role to play. Lawyers file lawsuits, policy people make policy, business people make business decisions, and artists have a role that is not always present in conversations like this. So really appreciate that.
I feel like they have a very important role in conveying information in ways that actually captivate people, because when I tell you my mouth was open during the performance and I was just like hunched over staring, I was hunched over staring. It was captivating. That was definitely one of the keynote highlights for me. What about for you, Grant?
That was hard to top. I, of course, enjoyed the privilege of speaking with Helen Crowley and Heba Larson. Helen Crowley's kind of a superstar figure in this space. She's been doing this for 30 years, both as an ecologist, then as a head of nature initiatives and sustainable sourcing at Caring, the fashion house. But I think the dance performance might take the cake. Undecided.
That was very unique. Well, we have some really interesting interviews following this segment. I'm personally really interested to hear from Evelyn Tickle at Grow Oyster Reefs. She just presented up there for Accelerate and had a pretty compelling pitch.
I'm excited to follow up on some conversations I want to have with Estelle Winkleman from Salesforce. She is the director for, I believe, climate philanthropy. 2%, I think she was saying in the session this morning, of corporate philanthropy goes directly to climate. And that number needs to grow, and she's doing the work to make that happen. So we'll dig in deeper with Estelle when she's back.
We will.
We'll see you soon.
See you soon. Welcome to Sidebar. We are joined by Evelyn Tickle from Grow Oyster Reefs and Grant, of course. And hey, Grant, I'm sure Evelyn already knows this, but did you know that a single oyster can filter up to 50 gallons of water a day? They're extremely crucial for coastal ecosystems and water quality, which is why our guest here has started a business dedicated to restoring oyster populations. Evelyn, welcome.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank y'all.
I will start by saying that's a fact I didn't know. That's one of the many things I don't know, but now do. So thank you for educating me. Congratulations on being featured in the Accelerate program here at Bloom.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind what you're growing with oyster reefs?
So it's my second, it's really technically my third concrete business, and I wanted to do something eco-positive and to be able to use this kind of amazing material. It has bad rap, but for very specific reasons, but to use it to do something good for the environment. And I just kind of knew there was something, and because I work with biomimicry, I started looking at the cementitious material that the oyster makes to attach itself permanently to a hard substrate. And I read scientific papers for like years and years, not years and years, 2 years technically.
That's year and year.
Yeah, year to year. And no one had actually worked on it yet. And so I decided that instead I found the oyster in peril. I discovered all these amazing feats. I mean, I had really just eaten it myself. And then I had this small sailboat. I was watching the reefs grow on the Chesapeake Bay, and I was like, this is so beautiful. And I couldn't believe that it was about to be wiped out, that we were so close to that.
Right. Yeah, and can you tell us a little bit how the process works and how you've scaled this restoration effort?
Well, it's been tricky, because it's difficult to get people to pay for ecosystem regeneration, right? I mean, and that's one of the big deals. And then the other big deal is that I was told, Evelyn, if you're going to bring in any money to the company as well to get some help on this, you've got to go really big, and you've got to show how you're going to make money as a business. We are a for-profit business on purpose, as opposed to a nonprofit organization. And I did that because I felt like the reefs would be regenerated quicker if there was more money involved, and a little bit of capitalism starts taking over to do good things. And so that was a definitive decision on that, quite frankly. Yeah.
When you explain, I imagine when you share with people what you do, their eyebrows might raise and be like, that's quite interesting. What thing are they usually most surprised by when you start to share what you're doing with Grow Oyster Reefs?
Well, when I first started it, my colleagues just were like almost mad at me. They thought it was just the most ridiculous thing they'd ever heard, because they really didn't. I mean, nature was just a different discussion back then. And so I've endured ridicule and being basically thrown out of my profession, not technically, but I have my master's in architecture. And so that being said, it's been incredibly interesting. But I guess the biggest thing that people don't know is that the oyster is not just this, I think they're incredibly delicious, species that we eat, and they're incredibly nutritious as well. But the oyster reef grows into this amalgamated, really structural reef. Some are vertical and some are horizontal, and that's where this extra species live. That's where we're getting all the ecosystem benefits. That's where they're really able to purify that water. That's where the 350 species are gathering, especially young fish, because they seek protection in this very, it's like it's a pretty scary thing, an oyster reef.
Like a rocky structure is what I'm imagining.
Like with all these little spaces in there. And so, the pre-colonization, there were so many oyster reefs, and we just don't know our world with them,
Yeah.
But
Well, we've got a little under a minute left, but in that minute, so if I were to send you out on the street here in San Jose and ask someone, what do you think about the state of biophilia and biomimic design? I think they'd say, what? So to those people, what is the state of biomimicry and biophilia just in our economy generally? Like, where does this fit? What is the state of from your lens?
Well, I see it being, and if I can just talk about it from our business, because I believe that our results are not matched by any of our competitors. I mean, it's a clear distance, and I believe that that's because of the biomimicry, and that we're looking at the oyster. I'm learning from the oyster. I'm learning from the mangroves. I'm understanding them as a species. I'm matching their material with the oyster shell to make our 85% calcium carbonate. So I think that people just don't quite understand it yet, but it's so effective,
Well, thank you for coming and helping to educate us and them. all the viewers here at the sidebar. Thank you for joining us, Evelyn. This is Evelyn Tickle from Grow Oyster Reefs.
Yes, thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Welcome back to Bloom Sidebar at Bloom 23. We are here with Estelle Winkleman from Salesforce. Welcome, Estelle.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So in 2020, Salesforce announced a goal of supporting and mobilizing the conservation, restoration, and growth of 100 million trees by the end of the decade, with a strategy focused on the right trees in the right places with the right people. Tell us more about the strategy and where you are in 2023 with this.
Absolutely. So Salesforce is really proud to be a founding partner of 1T.org, which is the movement to conserve, restore, and grow 1 trillion trees by 2030 for the benefit of people, biodiversity, and the planet. Yeah. And as part of our commitment to 1T.org, we set our own goal, which you just outlined, to support the mobilization of conservation, restoration, and growth of 100 million trees by 2030. So we've been working really, really hard on that. We're about halfway toward our goal, and we aren't slowing down. And I love the way you asked that question, because we've heard a lot of the rhetoric out there. This isn't just about putting trees in the ground. It's not just about trees for trees' sake. It really is about the incredible role that trees and forests have to play for people, biodiversity, and climate, for creating jobs, for sequestering carbon, for cleaning our air and purifying our water. And so it's about the right trees in the right places at the right time with the right partner. And so we're continuing to find those partners and to work with them. One great example is Acción Andina, which is a movement in Peru that's engaging indigenous people in helping to restore and helping to lead the restoration of 1 million hectares of native forests. So just one example of the work.
Amazing, and something we've been discussing.
Yeah. Let's move to a different 100 million. That is $100 million over, I think, 10 years that you've committed to donating to ecosystem restoration and climate justice. Can you tell us a little bit more behind that commitment and where that's at?
I'd love to. We love 100 millions.
Yes.
We have lots of them. This is $100 million over 10 years, an effort that we're about 2 years into. And we kicked it off because we recognize that philanthropy has this incredible role to play when it comes to de-risking the climate and nature markets, when it comes to supporting a lot of the critical early stage work that needs to happen to get more nature projects, especially high quality, locally led nature projects, on board and ready to scale. So the first 100 million, those trees, those are all shovel-ready projects. That early work has already been done, but we need more of it. And so through our philanthropy, we are laser focused on climate justice and working in places where there are communities that are least responsible for climate change, but most impacted by it. And we're trying to fund the things that nobody else wants to, that early stage work, like research and feasibility studies and demonstration projects. Wow. We're funding innovators and organizations to take risks and develop new solutions. So we're really excited about it. We're still early. We're proud of what we've done. We're learning a ton, about 2 years and $14 million in.
Wow. You've mentioned two really stellar projects here, and I know that protecting and restoring biodiversity is a critical pillar for the philanthropy that's being done at Salesforce. Can you tell us a little bit more about maybe one or two projects that are on the horizon that you're really looking forward to in this space?
Sure. So it's hard to pick a favorite, but I am really excited about mangroves these days.
Ooh.
I love mangroves, and we're supporting some really, really cool efforts. One of them is in Papua New Guinea in partnership with the Nature Conservancy. Papua New Guinea is situated within the Coral Triangle, which is one of the most mangrove biodiverse areas on the planet. And women in Papua New Guinea are some of the most socially and economically marginalized people on the planet. So in partnership with the Nature Conservancy, we're supporting women to be the guardians and beneficiaries of those ecosystems, helping to support women-led mangrove restoration and supporting women in developing sustainable business models that can serve the mangroves there while also generating livelihoods and incomes for them and their families through things like ecotourism and sustainable fisheries. So that's one project. And then we're also really excited to be supporting the Mangrove Breakthrough, which is a scale effort. The Mangrove Breakthrough is a new collaborative framework that's being led by all of the best science on mangroves, all of the leading conservation organizations, trying to bring together philanthropy, finance, companies to all work together to collectively conserve and restore the world's entire mangrove ecosystem.
It seems like intersectionality is a huge theme and a huge principle that you guys are incorporating in your philanthropy, and we appreciate you so much for being here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Estelle, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Estelle. Welcome back to another Sidebar interview. We're joined with Charlotte Kaiser at BTG Pactual Timberland Investment. Welcome.
Thank you, Timberland Investment Group. Sorry, it's a
Timberland
total
Investment
mouthful.
Group. Yes. Well, the Timberland Investment Group is a subsidiary of BTG Pactual, which is the largest investment bank in Latin America.
Yes.
And TIG has returned nearly $3 billion to investors in its 40-plus years of operation. So for those watching who may not understand how Timberland Investment works, can you please explain a little bit about how the returns are generated?
Yeah, for sure. So we're a Timberland Investment Management Organization, or a TIMO. We basically own land and grow trees on it. And then we sell those trees mostly on the stump to make wood products. So pulp, paper, dimensional lumber, long-lived wood products. And the returns are generated from the sale of that wood as well as from the appreciation of the underlying asset, which is the land. And there's a little bit from inflation as well.
And you're the head of impact finance. Can you elucidate a little bit what particularly is behind the word impact and paint a picture of what these transactions look like?
Sure. So we seek to be the most biodiversity positive TIMO, and I was hired about a year and a half ago to lead that charge, to create an impact framework wherein we're good stewards, we're good neighbors, and we're industry leaders for people and planet. And we do that in a number of ways. I'd say most prominently we have collaborations with two of the world's largest environmental NGOs, the Nature Conservancy and Conservation International, who serve as impact and conservation advisors on two of our core strategies to try to maximize the benefit that we can deliver for biodiversity as well as climate.
Awesome.
Yeah, and research shows that restoration, protection, and improved management of forests represent nearly 75% of the total global natural climate solution opportunities. How would you describe where the broader sustainable timberland investment space is right now?
Sure, and I should say that, the timber industry is a sustainable industry, right? We are very good stewards of our assets. We harvest trees and we replant them and grow new trees. And so it's a sustainable resource base that is the source of about half of the world's wood products, managed forests, even though they're only 7% of the world's timberland. So I think there's a huge opportunity to expand forest and protect existing standing forests to deliver both increased supply of wood products and climate solutions.
Some research I did before coming here to talk to you from EY, talking about how the growing awareness around climate change and the rising demand for timber products has made timberland investment a, quote, gold mine. How do we collectively, as this Bloom community here for the first time, how do we ensure that that gold mine is not overexploited?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and I think that stat I just cited, that 7% of the world's forests are managed, and they're 50% of the world's wood products. So that means that 50% of the world's wood products are coming from natural forests, and that's a threat, right? And so what we really want to do is grow the asset class of managed forests. I looked at that same research, and the kind of key takeaway is that sustainable forestry is an emerging star of net zero investment strategies. And so really I would encourage people interested in the sector to take a look at participants and make sure that they're meeting those high standards that we do feel we set as an industry. And I would say the asset class needs to grow so that we can really deliver on both the kind of supply needs of a growing population, but also the climate needs of the planet. We've heard over and over this week that nature can be a third of the climate solutions that we need to deliver to meet our Paris targets, and forestry is a huge part of that. And it's not just growing trees, but it's also delivering long-lived wood products that can substitute for very high carbon intensity materials like steel and concrete. We see mass timber kind of becoming a burgeoning new industry. We're excited about that at TIG, and we're excited about ways that wood can become a bigger part of the circular bioeconomy.
Great. And with about 40 seconds left on the clock, I'd like to ask you, what is one thing that you would want the average person to understand about this industry and a misconception that you want to bust?
Sure. Managed timberland is sustainable. I think that's really the biggest takeaway. Our industry clears a very high bar for sustainability. As I said, there's a really big misconception that cutting down trees is a damaging thing to do, and in a managed forest that's well managed by a responsible owner, cutting down trees is a great thing to do because it takes that carbon that tree is sequestered and puts it into a product, and it grows a new tree to sequester more carbon. And so it's really key to the solution, I think, for nature-based solutions to climate.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
My pleasure.
We've been with Charlotte Kaiser of BTG Pactual Timberland Investment Group.
Thank you so much.
Yes, right on.
Yes. Thank you. Well, we're joined with Charlotte Nash from the Artist Climate Collective. She just did a wonderful performance up there, and I know Grant and I have quite a few questions other than what's your ankle routine, because I was watching the way your toes were just pointed so firmly, and I was very impressed. Other than that, Charlotte, you founded the Artist Climate Collective, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, I did. Me and two other dancers founded it together. So
very cool. And how did that come about? And what's your reach? Like, how many performances have you done? How do people usually react?
Yeah, this is actually our first live performance, which is really we're very small. We started in 2020, and kind of as a passion project. I like most art institutions during the pandemic, ballet was kind of shut down, and so I was laid off. I went back to school, and I was looking for a way to bring the arts back into my life, and was also super inspired by the youth activists of the climate movement. So I reached out to two friends that I knew were also super inspired by it, and we started Artist Climate Collective. And yeah, we've been going ever since. We mainly do dance films. We've also done some galleries, and yeah, we kind of reach all spectrums of the arts, but this is our first live performance, so I'm super excited about it.
Wow. So, we're honored.
Yeah, seriously, I didn't know that was the first. That's awesome. The climate and biodiversity crises require all hands on deck.
Yes.
This is something I think that we know in this space. Lawyers should file lawsuits, policymakers should make policy. I was talking to Nathan about this before he got on. And oftentimes art is referenced kind of as an add-on, or yes, that makes sense, but outside of maybe a documentary feature that you are capturing what's happening as a result of climate disaster, I think a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around where art fits and galvanizing action and bringing awareness. How would you describe that to the layperson who has no artistic talent?
AKA me.
Yeah, that's both of us.
I think art is essential, mainly because it brings people in, and it forms community and conversations around certain movements that you might not otherwise get with when you're watching a talk and there's a lot of scientific talk or acronyms, you can kind of get lost, but when you're watching art, it's something that we can all connect with, and it's like nature. You have a feeling of awe and a moment of reflection, and I think every social movement needs that. It has this unique emotional power to bring people in and make them want to be a part of the movement.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Was there a particular moment, like Joel was asking the audience here at the end about their aha moment in terms of what they've learned here in their 2 days as professionals joining at Bloom? Did you have an equivalent aha moment in terms of the intersection of climate and the art that you're able to bring to people, that you realized, oh, this is a quite powerful tool?
Yeah, I think the idea of hope, actually, because so often we're kind of in a doomsday scenario with the climate crisis, and sometimes you need to just step back and watch a dance or view a piece of art that brings you hope or makes you excited for the future and what people can create, and look at these amazing things that we can do together as a community to create and bring people joy. And I think that has really resonated with me in the climate movement, what I can bring as an artist and share with the community. So,
yeah, I like that idea of creation and bringing what you can to the table in your own talents. And you brought so much to the stage, and there was 3 dancers I saw. And I wanted to know, what was the story you were trying to tell with that piece?
So it was originally commissioned to give the audience a moment of reflection. So you guys have had this amazing event over the past 2 days, and I'm sure people have learned so much, and sometimes it can be overwhelming to go from talk to talk and breakout room to breakout room. So it's a time to watch art and have a space to reflect on what you've learned. And so we wanted to give people a sense of serenity and that feeling of being in the woods and just it's so nice to just be able to calm down for a second, calm your nervous system and really be able to reflect on what you've learned here.
Love that. Well, we're very lucky to have had you at the sidebar, have had you on stage for your inaugural in-person event, the Bloom people.
Yes.
We're very appreciative. We've been talking to Charlotte Nash from the Artist Climate Collective. Thank you again for joining us, Charlotte.
Thank you so
Charlotte.
much. Yeah, that was so fun.
Appreciate it. Hopefully we can have you back.
All right, we're back. I'm still Grant Harrison. This is still Nathra. This is the end of the Bloom program in its inaugural year. That was quite a 48 hours.
It was.
I want to quickly just focus on, in terms of takeaways, that last conversation we had with Charlotte.
Yeah.
I personally don't always do the best job of finding the hope and the kind of like project that we want to create, not just the doom we want to avoid. Her talk, Shea Bastida earlier, the youth climate activist, reinstilling that aspiration feels quite nice. I imagine I'm not alone in that sentiment. So important and good to take the blinders off a little bit and stop focusing on just the doom, the standards, the work, and realize that there's a much bigger picture, which is why we're doing this in the first place. So.
Absolutely. I think that there was so much inspiration to be like sought from that, and something that you kept repeating throughout the sidebar interviews, which I just want to reinforce to the crowd as a takeaway is you don't need to have climate or environment or sustainability in your title to do this work and to engage with nature and biodiversity.
Yeah.
I think it's something that all of us can be a part of, which is something that was so demonstrated by the Artist Climate Collective. And I also just want to say congratulations and a huge thank you and a huge kudos to the nature and biodiversity team here at GreenBiz. Teresa Lieb, Seth Olson, Alex Navarro, and all of the other staff and teams at GreenBiz that put together this event, our sponsors, our speakers, everyone who traveled to be here for this inaugural event that's just going to keep getting better and better each year.
That's right. Yeah, I guess we'll see you in about 364 and a half days, if that's how a year works. I might have gotten the math wrong on that.
I think you could be right.
Yeah, I could be right. Well, we'll be back to see you again soon enough. In the meantime, we're going to sign off and maybe take some deep breaths, maybe drink water, or maybe go to a networking reception. I think I'll take the latter.
Yes, and for those of you who are attending Verge, we'll see you at the Verge After Dark.
That's right.
After party.
Coming up.
All right, thank you
Signing
guys.
off.
Bye.